Hello and welcome. Now we're going to be making a mermaid skirt today. So basically we have our skirt. It's going to go sort of in and out, and it's going to have panels that go in and out as well, so that we've got that feeling of motion. Okay, now honestly this sew is all about the maths, I'm afraid, so if you do feel like I'm giving you a maths lesson, I can only apologise. First of all, we need the hip measurement, the widest measurement, and we need the waist measurement. Okay, now because we're going to be sewing this in panels, I recommend, if you're a larger lady, you can do 4 panels. If it's like a size 8 or size 10, then maybe only 3 panels, because it will just be too busy, the panels will be too thin. So 4 panels I'm going to do today for you. So 4 panels. Now we're going to need seam allowance on each of these panels. So it's going to be the hip measurement plus a whole 8 inches, because half an inch on each side, so that's an inch for each panel. We're going to have so many more extra seams, so we are hip plus 8 inches, so a lot of fabric. Now the waist, we need to know how much the garment's going to come in, so the waist measurement, and we're still going to need those 8 inches seam allowance. But what we're going to do, because we don't need the fabric to come in much at the stomach, in fact it will distort the lines, so we need the fabric to come in from the hips to the waist. So we're going to make our darts at the side and 2 at the back. So the front panels are going to stay the same. So the difference between the waist and the hip, whether it's just 6 inches, we are going to divide that number by 3. I know, that's why I chose 6. And then we are going to take 2 inches off the side, 2 inches off this side, and the other 2 inches we're going to take off 1 inch on each side of this dart. Now it doesn't matter when we're sewing, the back darts have got to be in the same place, whether we're going to lose all this fabric or not. Okay, so that's that. So the other measurement we need is the distance between the hip and the waist. Now it's different in some people. If you're really tall, then obviously it would be bigger, but we are only talking sort of 3 inches on most people, maybe 5 at the most. So you know, that's an interesting one we can do. Now when we say mermaid, we do need it to come in slightly, but I'm only going to suggest a couple of inches or an inch, but just so it gives the movement. But you don't want it as tight as possible, because obviously we could probably skinny legs in there, and then it would just look really silly. And then we're going to go out again. Before the knees, so if we've got our knees here, we need it to start coming around sort of mid-thigh so that we can walk in it. So it literally is in and out, in and out. Now if we were going to do it as panels, which is fair enough, what we would be left with is, I'm going to exaggerate these panels as well, is the general shape. This is going to be smaller by 1/4 than this. I know, but we're not going to do panels. And then we're following the line, and then we're coming in slightly for the legs, and then we're coming out again. Okay, but we're not going to do that. So forget all that. Alright, we have the hip measurement. The hip measurement plus the 8 for our seam allowance, because there's lots of seams. Now if you're lucky enough that you can do it in one piece of cloth, then that's fair. If you're unlucky, then what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to do our joiny hem, Yeah, so at the minute I'm in a circle, but if I was to do 2 long panels, then this is how I would do it. And I would going to have to sacrifice slightly more cloth, so I'd pull that over, and then I would start there. So I could come down for my waist, come down for my hips, back in slightly, and then we can do our curb. So yes, but I would just be cutting these 2 pieces of cloth, and then I would be correct. Okay, so that's if we were to do for 2 long sheets. We're actually quite lucky that we can fit it on just 1 panel. So we're going to be sewing a zip in here. Now, depending on your zip length and how you like your zips, it may be that you have to do quite a long zip. So the back panel we can't change, but let's get rid of the fabric so that we're back to, we've got the hip and we've got the waist measurement and we've got our +4. So we know at this far corner, from the waist to the hip, we need to lose X amount of fabric. We know that we have half of that we're going to make into a dart. Now, this is folded over. Oh, that's such a shame you can't see that. Oh, I didn't think this through. So this is folded over, and then we're going to make our dart. And we don't need our dart quite as big. Lovely. And our dart only needs to be the back of this garment. So we're going to cut down on a V. Now we need to lose another V halfway along this back panel that we have. And it needs to be the same size and the same depth as the previous one. Now it may look to you as if, because we're not cutting it out as panels, we're not writing a pattern, we're just cutting straight onto the fabric, that we're wasting fabric. But the only thing that we've lost is this, and everything else that's left on this table we are now going to be using as the skirt, because we lose so much on the actual sewing of it. Okay, so we've done our losing of fabric. Now the next thing we have to do is we have to make our swishy bits. Now, if you're careful, or if you can get one of these chalk pencils and you can write on them, then we don't need to make them the same, because if I very gang-ho here just cut a swirl in this fabric, I'm going to join it up to the dart point. As long as this piece of fabric, gets sewn to this, then I'm going to be fine. So again, another swirl. And this time I'm joining the centre seam. So, what am I just keep pulling it out of the shot. So I've got number 1, I've got number 2, and now number 3 has to go in between those 2 points. So same swirly. Now I'm going to line this skirt because it's just going to be a lot more comfortable. But it really is up to you. There we go. Another swirly. So this is going to be number 3. And then number 4, as long as I keep these in order, it's fine. If I sew them in the wrong order, then it's going to be bumpy, and that's not good. Now I'm going to carry on cutting, and I'm going to start my sewing. Now, as I said, I'm using an overlocker, and I am going to make sure I mark out the line of where I've got to sew, because we've so far been very precise about where we're going to cut. That we've got to then keep it together. Lovely, it's going on top. This one I'm going to join up that, and then the next 2 I'm going to join up the dart and the side seam from the other side. So let's get our overlocker out. Oh, excuse me. And what I need to do is, with my tape measure, I need to find a way of marking my 1/2 inch from my sewing line. So I've got that there. Now, sticky labels, marker pen, if it's yours you can. And yeah, I know, I hope I've explained that well enough. And yeah, let's get sewing and I'll be back. So I'm back. Okay, so what I've done is I've cutted the rest of the panels out, and I have the last one to do. So even though I know I'm 100% sure, what I do is I hold them up so I can see that I've got the right one. Yeah, does that make sense to you? I can see that it sort of goes in and out at the right point. I probably chose a bad one to show you because that was the one with the V in it. Okay, so then I line it up under the machine. With an overlocker you just sort of sew on, and you just get used to it, you really do. Making sure I've got my black line, move that round slightly, and then all I have to do is sew, but I have to keep this bottom one running straight, and I have to lay this top one over. So it is a case of I sort of do that, and I just follow it round. Pulled it a bit tight there, getting excited. So yes, I will continue sewing this last piece. And then of course, I have to sew up the 2 ends together, which I'm going to do and leave a space for the zip. So that off. Now I had a feeling I have caught it. That's a shame. I'll have to see whether I can fix that in a minute, but we can do the last seam and we'll just come back to that. So last 2 together, measure the zip. So that's fine, that's fine. So we're going to start from there. So with overlockers, what we do is we've got the needle down and we start it sewing, we come on at an angle, and then we just turn it and then it starts sewing normally. So away we go. That's grand. We can get rid of this overlocker. Straighten that. We're going to line it. So now what I'm going to do is this is folded over. It's just a piece of lining, any colour. Now it doesn't need to go all the way to the bottom, if that makes sense. It just doesn't. I suggest that you do it to your hips, at least. So, now what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to lay this out. I suppose I just take the 2 hip seams, they go in, give it a little shake, and then lay this out. So, and now all I need to do is cut round the edge of this skirt. So easy enough. And then I'm going to whiz through this on the overlocker. Yeah? And then I'm going to sew them together. So that's all I need to do for there. I've got 2 seams to sew and a couple of cuts to make. I don't know whether to do that now or not. There we go. Fold it over so that I know it's correct. Choose the length completely up to you. There's just no 2 ways about it. It's whatever you're comfortable with. I always do it quite far away from the bottom of the skirt. I know some people sew literally so that they've got millimetres of the lining showing. We don't need that at all. We need it to line the bit that's close to the skin. Now making sure you've got all 4 bits of fabric, and I'm just following that black line that I drew earlier. So, lovely. I take it back to the overlocker. Now I didn't cut the lining out before because I was going to use the top bit as a pattern, and I'm a bit of a cheater like that, so. And then it literally is straight down these 2 long seams. At the other end. Okay, so then my 2 long seams done. Now what I need to do is I need to take it by the waist, and I need to find halfway. So I'm just going to pinch it out like that, and then I've got halfway. I'm going to take the zip that I had earlier, and I am going to just lie that on the fabric. And all I'm doing is I'm cutting to my finger. The zip might have moved. Now, a friend of mine told me a great tip for when sewing things like lining, if it's a bit flighty, putting a piece of tissue paper in between the 2. I know, and we do know that paper sews very easily, and it's quite easy to get rid of afterwards. So, alright, so I'm back to the main body of the skirt. I'm going to take the corner of the zip, and I'm going to place it right side to right side so that my seams are both facing outwards. Now, I know I'm a huge fan of giving things a little shake, just to get them all. Okay, so now I've got my 2 bits together, and what I'm basically going for is a long tube. And what I do have to make sure is that I catch all the bits, but also that I'm prepared for the next segment, because some of them kind of come up at angles, and what I'm trying to do is just smooth these all out. So I know now we have a skirt that's lined. Next job is just to hem the bottom, easy enough, and to put the zip in, so, which is always fun. Now we're going to have to change machines with that, that's why I wanted to put the lining in first. Now I must admit, if I was with you or in person, or I was just sewing this at home on my own, I would probably sew the zip in and then sew the lining together, just because it makes it a bit less fiddly. But you know, I can get rid of this machine and I can just get on. So yeah, another thing to watch for is these long threads as well. I'm not sewing them in, so I know. I'll be back. Hello and welcome back. So yeah, I had a little break actually, and I finished up to date with my sewing. Next job is the zip and the hem, which is easy enough. And I did think, oh, you know, I was quite cruel to you. Alright, so favourite skirt, draw around it, add extra in the middle for however many panels you want, okay? I'm very sorry if it doesn't make any sense, but yeah, with this what I would do is I would have my fabric on a fold, I would have the extra, and then I would literally just draw around it. Okay, so I can only apologise, and yes. Okay, so I have my sewing machine here, and I have my garment, and it is so nearly finished. Now it does need a zip, so it just does. What I've got it the right way around with the lining on the inside. I'm going to turn it inside out. Try not to rip it. Yeah, terrible. Okay. Now what I need to do is I need to sew so that my zip is in between these two pieces of fabric. Yep, easy enough. So I'm going to put my zip right to the top of the outer lining, and then I'm going to fold over Okay, so what we've got left to do is just to put the zip in. I have a zipper foot here, which is kind of, yeah, it's got a bit in the middle. So what we have to do is, what we can do is we can either put the zipper foot on this side or this side, and it really just depends which side the zip is on. But also, if you've got a machine that you can adjust the size of the needle you sew. Now, always put the pins so you can pull them out. And I think ideally you want to make sure that the pins pull towards you so that you can, yeah, so that you can get some continuity really. And I think I did these the wrong way round. So I'm just sort of forcing this under the machine, and I say forcing, what I don't want to do is definitely not to damage the outer fabric, and yeah, to get it under the machine. And then once it's held under there, I'm just going to double check that my lining's not caught up, because you know it's all the way over here, and if I pull the end then I'd have to unpick and redo. So So when I've got everything in line, I'm going to put the needle down just to make sure that it starts in the right place, and then I can sew to the next pin. So, yes, I know, away we go. Now the nice thing about these modern zips is if you do accidentally start sewing on them, you're not going to damage your machine, but you know, nobody wants to unpick, do they? I'm leaving the needle down, putting the foot up, and very carefully I'm going to do this zip. And I say carefully, I don't want to pull it away from the pins or anything, but I do want to get the straight line, and if I do that then I can get the line straight. So I'm now removing the last pin, and I am holding it securely underneath my finger. So I'm at the end. So yes, you know, there are more complicated ways to put a zip in, but pins are brilliant, you know. Just work through and make sure that you've got your lining all folded up as well, because there's a lot to consider. So there we are. We have our zip. We have our skirt, which is oh, that's not really a good view for you. I just tuck the lining in. Such is life. Now it's really up to you whether you tack a couple of stitches just to keep the lining going downwards, as it were. Yeah, because sometimes if you're in a rush to put it on, you can bunch up your lining. But yeah, it's really up to you. If it was for me, I wouldn't. If it was for somebody else, then I would just literally put a couple of tacking stitches onto the seam. So, but yeah, excellent. We have a mermaid skirt, and no one else is going to have a skirt like that. Thank you so much for watching. My name's Fiona from Weekly Sewing Bee.